is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, who also has direct ties to the statistics department. So Dr. Egbulefu, he finished his Ph.D. here at Rice in statistics in 2013. He also has a MS in statistics and computational finance from Rice. He finished his BS in 2004 in computer science from Cornell University. He has over 10 years experience in quantitative modeling, software development, and risk analysis. Since 2019, he's been the founder and CEO of Meritic, a seed stage startup that leverages community discourse, blockchain transitions, and market data to discover pricing and competitor intelligence. So also from 2014 to 2016, he was an assistant VP of quant analytics credit risk at Barclays. And in between 2004 and 2007, he was a programmer and an analyst at Hewlett Packard. So please give a warm round of applause for our next speaker.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Do I need this? So I'm Joseph Egbulefu, founder of Meritic, where we're building intelligence for online communities and markets. And so recently, I started working with a few vendors in the NFT space, focused on doing price discovery for NFTs. So I'd like to talk about our progress in that goal and why this is important. So first, I'll talk about the utility of NFTs, the NFT market, the various entities in the market, prices, what are the price drivers for NFTs, and then why do we want to do price discovery of NFTs, and then I'll wrap up with our progress. So let's talk about the utility of NFTs. So NFTs are enabling a new economy in gaming. So for those who are gamers, you probably know that today you can essentially create skins, create various characters, and actually play with these characters you create and actually sell them as well, so that other players can buy your characters you created. So essentially, game developers can now have a whole new economy where they leverage what you've created, and you can also sell what you've created to the entire world. Also providing a market for elite access. Some of the NFTs that you may know of, you may think it's just the image that people are paying for, but actually these images actually allow access to a very elite club where people meet, exchange ideas for investing, and just build a broader, richer network. And so NFTs allow us to actually price that. They're integral to the economy of the metaverse. Essentially, any token on the metaverse, be it a location, be it an ad, can be monetized. And NFTs allow us to discover that market and give a price to those digital entities. And of course, they provide a market for digital art. This is what many of us are familiar with. In fact, many museums now are launching NFTs. For musicians, for example, you know that during the COVID lockdown, many musicians couldn't perform. Streaming royalties are very, very small. So if you can't go to a venue and do a performance, how do you earn a living? So NFTs provided a market for many, not the very large musicians, but the smaller and mid-tier to actually generate revenue during the lockdown. And lastly, they support various methods of blockchain-based farming, which the previous speaker touched on lightly. So I think that one should be clear. So now that we kind of understand the utility of NFTs, before we get going, let's talk about what are some of the market players and market entities. So typically there's what's known as a minter. A minter is typically a firm, or in some cases an individual, who creates an NFT. Typically these NFTs, they create in a collection. And of course there's a market, and then there's a blockchain. So when an NFT is minted, essentially it lives on the blockchain. It's written in the ledger that this firm or this person has owns this entity at that time, and it's recorded. Next, then once it's listed on the market, you have these players who are interested in holding the NFT assets. And of course, as a market, they will bid and transact on these assets that they like, and eventually someone will make an offer that is accepted, and once that offer is accepted, it's written on the distributed ledger that the product has changed hands. It's probably important at this point to point out that there are other fairly murky transactions. There's what's known as transfers, which is when two people go to Twitter or go to offline, off market, and agree to trade an NFT, and they just go to the blockchain and do an exchange, and so the market doesn't know what price that exchange occurred at. So besides bids, offers, and closing sales, there's also transfers, which is not clear. So now that we understand how the market, the players, and the blockchain interact to create this NFT space, let's focus on what should be the price drivers for an NFT. So here we have an NFT token, which one of many in a collection. And the first thing that should determine the price is what's known as rarity. If you have a collection of, say, 1,000 items, hopefully some of them are more rare based on certain characteristics than others. And the rarer they are, hopefully the pricier they are. Another is the brand. Who's creating this collection? Do they live outside of the NFT market? Are they a known entity? And do they have good quality work? Another one is the collection metadata. Of course, how big is the collection? How many previous owners are there of that collection? And various other interesting things. What is the description? What is it about? Why do I care? And then, of course, there's the community. The community is where you evangelize the work. This is where you essentially, hey, we've minted this. This is the address. This is it. This is where you find out. And this is essentially where there's a broader market. And lastly, probably what's becoming more and more important is the utility of the NFT. So in a sense, in this case, this is a music NFT, and if you purchase this NFT, you get access to the full master recording of the music, and you also get access to make decisions concerning the organization, the DAO that owns the music. So in a sense, it's not just the digital art that you're buying or the music, but you get the full master. So that leads to a different set of buyers than just a listener, perhaps someone who wants to use the music in additional work. So it's this utility which kind of creates an optionality, or you can think of NFTs as structured, traditionally structured contracts. And so when we price NFTs, we should consider that there is this secondary value aside from, a typical digital asset. Right, so now that we've talked about what are the potential price drivers, why should we do price discovery for NFTs? Or appraisal as is commonly referred. Well, the first thing, if you start looking at this data from OpenSea and other NFT markets, you realize is that the market is highly illiquid. So here, if you have a collection of, say, 5,000 items that's on the market, essentially about 500 of them will actually be transacted on over, say, a 10-month period. And when someone buys a particular NFT, the next transaction on that asset may be a week, 2 weeks, a month. So the price becomes very stale. And when you have that problem and you start looking at, well, so if a very small percentage of these assets are transacted on, but then you also notice that the price of the untransacted assets are also changing. So you start to wonder what is driving the returns on other assets. So what we're looking at here is the weekly returns from September of last year to March of this year of a set of NFT basket, a set of NFT collections against Ethereum. As you can see how extreme the portfolio returns are on NFT collections versus Ethereum, which is also extreme. The important thing here to point out is that many of the assets, like 90% of the assets, have price movements, but no real, the product is not changing hands. So this is a big problem. In a sense, it's pointing to the fact that what's going on is probably, I mean, we haven't looked at any real depth to figure out what's driving the changes, but perhaps if you have a collection and a sale happens on one of the items in the collection, you know, the minter or the owner of that collection uses that as a benchmark for the other assets in the collection, and in a sense, adjusts the prices as well, marks them up or down. And so it's not really individuals transacting on them, but it's just a hunch that the collection owner has. So this is pointing to a problem. We need a way to, in a sense, algorithmically figure out what is the best price. So we're going about this by collecting a fairly, you know, not too large, about 518 collections. I mean, keep in mind, each of these collections has thousands of assets in them. So our data contains roughly 500,000 tokens or 500,000 NFTs. It includes various categories: art, photography, gaming, music, virtual worlds. We also collect data from Twitter and Discord, particularly the community sizes, because the idea being the larger the community, the greater audience, and potentially the higher pricing you can get. And you can see the period that we looked at from May 2021 to April of 2022. So given the different types of data that we're using, the best way that I've come up with modeling this type of data is to use neural nets, mainly because they're flexible. So we have the collection metadata, you know, how big is the collection, what is the description, a few other attributes about the collection, asset traits, essentially, you know, each NFT has a bunch of traits, asset transaction history, you know, essentially the bids, the offers, sales, etc. The holder transaction history, you know, this is data directly from the blockchain. They look at the chain and look at the history of who has been holding a particular asset, what is their balance, and hopefully that can inform what direction the asset may be trading at. And then community metadata, what is the size of their community? Do they even have a community? And the output we want from our model is essentially a price curve. And the reason why we want a price curve is that, let's say someone is trying to mint something and they haven't actually gone to the market yet. They want to know, if we mint today, what is the potential revenue outcome in 2 weeks, 3 weeks? So a full curve gives them more insight. And so they can essentially figure out what is their, you know, ask what if questions. So we've been going at this for about 3 months now. And while we're not done yet, we do have some progress. Ideally, we'd like to get the prediction error under 20%, but we're not quite there yet. And this is generally, you know, some particular categories, the error is worse than others, but this is around the ballpark where we are. So just to conclude, so price discovery of NFTs enables minters to perform better optimization for their market strategies. You know, what is the ideal size of the collection I should have? Essentially, they can tune and adjust to market changes with a good model. It also enables holders to more accurately price risk characteristics. Very few places you can go to and get a good measure of performance and risk that's based on real prices as opposed to just what is listed. And lastly, it supports NFT yield farming. If you're thinking about lending based on an NFT portfolio and you have stale prices, then clearly it's not a very smart yield bearing or lending strategy. So with that, I will take some questions. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. You mentioned one of the factors in your model is community metadata. I'm just wondering, is the fact that many of these communities are access restricted by holders of the tokens themselves a problem when it comes to collecting the data?
Yes, it is, particularly in Discord. That's one of the challenges that we faced. But we plan on getting around that, as many other, if you say Web 2 has gotten around it. So if you own a Discord server and you're focused on NFTs, there's a lot of questions you'd like. For example, how many times is a certain NFT product being discussed? So we can essentially offer insights to the server owners in exchange for access to the server. So that's our approach to tackling that. And actually, at least a couple of the NFT vendors that we've spoken with have actually said, here's our server. Just get us the insights. Yes.
So Joseph, thank you for that very insightful talk. I am always blown away by this market because I don't understand it, and thank you for adding some clarity to it. So the 518 collections that you've chosen, can you say a little bit about maybe one or two of those collections?
Right.
I'm not a gamer, so.
Right. So about 150 of them are art. At least 100 is music. Then we have about, I think, 80 virtual worlds and a few gaming. I don't know what the exact number is, but so the way we chose them was, like OpenSea makes it very hard for you to scrape collections, as you would imagine. So we used ranking. It has a rank system on OpenSea, and essentially we took the top tier of collections across various categories of interest. And the main thing we're trying to get is a good mixture of liquid collections that are reasonably traded, as well as the mid-tier to lower ones, so we can have a good mixture in the data.
But these are all legitimate collections.
Yes.
I don't know how they would be not legitimate, but.
Yes, they are legitimate in the sense that there is some activity. If you're familiar with OpenSea, as you move further down the ranking, you see that there are collections that just sit there without any activity. So we try to avoid those. But even with that, of those roughly 500,000 tokens, I think, once we were doing the data cleaning and made some adjustments, I would say it came out to roughly, I think, about 9,000 tokens that we actually used to train the model, because we had restrictions that there had to be trades on them, right? And not just a single trade. Within a 30-day period, there had to be at least 2 trades. Like, these are some of the restrictions we used, and that, in a sense, dropped down the actual size of the training set.
And so with those rules, does that preclude sort of these astronomical prices that you see on some of these NFTs that just seem so bizarre?
Well, like Bored Ape Club is one of the ones in the data, and those prices are astronomical. So it does not. Even you will see that sometimes what happens is, like, we ignore the starting price completely. Because if a minter will pick a very, very big high price, right? because, hey, I want to maximize value. So if I set a really high price, then people won't start bidding very low. So things like that, but it just really just exploded the model. So we just got rid of starting price because at some point it just had very little bearing on the real transacted price.
So if I was an artist and I wanted to create my own set of my own collection and make it valuable, is that possible or is that unachievable?
Well, you should probably get a good get the right community involved. That would be a good start. I think you can. There are some that are doing well. Yes. Yes.
Okay, I think we have 2 more questions.
Quick question. If I look at your business and what you just explained, it sounds like you're kind of like a Zillow for NFTs, or like Kelly Blue Book is for cars, obviously Zillow for real estate, and you're trying to do something similar for NFTs, if I understand correctly. What, when you look at the problems you're running into of access to data, those firms have also had problems trying to get access to different sets of data, right? Home prices and stuff are kind of opaque sometimes. Transactions aren't very frequent, right? The home that I've been in hasn't sold in a while, that sort of thing. Have you looked into those industries to see how they do information gathering and price modeling? Thank you.
A little bit. I think that our problem is not as bad as the more traditional data access that you have, because the blockchain is open, right? I mean, you can it takes a lot of work, but you can certainly get data from the blockchain. Currently, OpenSea market data is reasonably free to access. Twitter data, if you pay for it, you get it. So Discord and a few other community channels are not open, but it's still, so the problem is not as bad. I think as we start, once we get past this phase of modeling, where we're essentially using, I guess, what you would consider, say, maybe level 1 type of data around the NFT market, then as you start thinking of NFTs as structured products, we would then potentially have additional problems. But because you can imagine a scenario where you're trying to price a music NFT and you query for the artists, listeners on, say, on Spotify or something like that, just to get a broader view before you make that pricing, and then you run into those more. And I think if we're adequately funded, we should be able to overcome those hurdles.
Q&A.
Thanks so much for the talk. Are there copyright laws associated with ownership of an NFT, and how does that drive value? So one of the NFT I just showed, part of the ownership is you get the full master. So I think in some cases, you have to look at the traits and read the description of the actual product you're buying to see who owns it, if you get the copyright for the product that you purchase. I think that is, it should be clear on the traits or the attributes of the NFT, whether you own the copyright or not.
Okay, I believe we have one last question.
I appreciate you're not going through the obligatory definition of NFT, but suppose I'm a musician. What am I putting in a token? Am I putting the music and lyrics, or am I putting the performance, or my arrangement, or what am I putting in there?
Well, you can put the master. So the actual product you see for music is, you get the sound, so you can listen to it. And in addition to that, some music NFTs will give you access to the master, the full master. So it depends on the artist. Generally, I think what we've seen is that musicians don't directly go to OpenSea or the markets. There's usually not intermediary firms that they actually go to who handle much of this. But to answer your question, it depends. Sometimes it's the full master, the full recording, but in a sense, it's a music you can listen to for music. A more important thing with music as well is that there are these, token-gated assets. So if I'm a musician, you buy my NFT, I will give you access to future tracks that we may not release. I may also say, for those who hold my NFT, if we come to your city, you get free concert entrance. So it's these embedded additional utilities that will also be part of the NFT.
Please join me in giving a warm round of applause to our speaker.